Welcome to Logistics Executive TV. I'm Cassandra Lee, Global Managing Partner for the Executive Search and HR Consulting Division. Today I'm joined by Susan Njoroge, who is the Managing Director of Responsible Business Consulting, and she's also a Senior Associate with the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. Susan, welcome to Logistics Executive TV, and thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Cass. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Now, today we can have a discussion about sustainability. So it's certainly something that we are hearing a lot about within our clients globally. There's lots of different initiatives happening across the various continents. Some organisations clearly have a lot more progress than others. You've actually been in the industry working in sustainability for over 20 years and have had an international career working with organisations such as Standard Chartered Bank, Unilever and DHL in sustainability. So we really want to get your insights based on a wealth of experience that you have across the globe to really start to understand what is sustainability, let alone the whole ESG initiatives, what people actually need to be doing, where they need to go, sort of touching on some of those, macro aspects that are happening globally, key initiatives that people might need to do or some certain challenges and how people can sort of start to evolve their organisation on the journey. So do you want to sort of kick off and just give us a bit of an overview? Yeah. What is sustainability? What do we really need to be understanding about sustainability and ESG?
Okay, great. Thanks, Cass. So maybe I'll just begin by saying sustainability is not so complex. It's the idea that what we're producing and consuming is in balance with our environmental needs and our social well-being. So if you put it as simply as that, that's what sustainability is about, finding that balance where we're not overproducing, consuming to the detriment of environment or to damaging our society and communities. So the definition itself of sustainability actually came out in the 1980s, and it's actually from the definition of sustainable development, which talks about development that meets the needs of us as the current generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So it's really about saying how we're living today, what we're doing for ourselves today cannot limit what our children, grandchildren, etc. will be able to do for their own lives. So that's where the sustainability definition comes in from. ESG is also a word that is part of sustainability. So it stands for environmental, social, and governance. And because the finance sector has come in a big way into the sustainability agenda, it's a term they're very familiar with. So that's why there's the ESG terminology that's used, but it still goes out to define the same thing as sustainability. What are you investing in? What are stakeholders interested in? Is there that balance where preserving our environment, protecting and improving the well-being of our society, not to the detriment because we're just pursuing our economy and production and consumption? So I don't know, I hope that gives you a little good sense.
Very much so. And I think that sort of keeps it really in the terms that everybody can comprehend and why, because, with anything, people have different interpretations of definitions and what it means in the context of their business or their country or their continent and how it's applied. But, in its essence, things aren't as complex as they need to be. So being able to keep that balance and really sort of looking at it from that context, I think, allows people to really understand why it's such a critical initiative and why every organisation does need to have that focus on it. So from a macro perspective, where do you see organisations at on their sustainability journey today? What's the macro overview from a global perspective, in 2023, coming off the back of the pandemic and obviously so many other geopolitical issues happening around the world and continuing to evolve?
Yeah. So, that's just by the issues that you highlight, I think that hits the nail on the head on where we at versus where we should be. So, you look the reality of climate change that we are currently going through. There was the Paris Agreement in 2015 that said, 196 countries said, look, we're going to commit to reducing our emissions and we want to keep global average temperature to 1.5. We are at 1.2 today. We're actually emitting more than we did before. Things slowed down in the pandemic, obviously, because a lot of life came to a standstill. But we're pretty much back to where we're at. So where are we supposed to be? We're definitely not there. There's still so much to do. And I think what's starting to land with people, which is a really good thing, is the interdependence between us and our environment. It's the air we breathe, the water we drink, the bees that pollinate our plants for the food that we eat, so the reality of the synergy beyond the disasters that we're seeing with floods and, fire and drought or famine, etc. There's a lot we have to do in the next decade, just looking from an emissions and climate change perspective. And then now there's things like the cost of living crisis or the inequality that became so stark during the pandemic, be it on vaccination, or when you think about it today, there's a billionaire being produced almost every year, 26 billionaires or something like that. That's the statistic, But for the majority of people, what's actually in their pockets is shrinking more and more. So there's a significant inequality, not just between countries, but also within countries, that's becoming so much more exacerbated. And I think just using those two examples, it tells us, we're not doing better. We're not making the progress that we need to make. And I think, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report that came out just in March tells us that it's this decade, it's the next decade we have to get it right on climate change. Otherwise, we put into the system things that won't change for millennia. So it's make or break in this decade for the future of our children, etc. So there has to be a lot more momentum. We've started, but everyone needs to start taking action.
So in taking that action, what are some of the key things that people can do at an individual level and then from our corporate level? In our corporate roles, what do we need to be doing to even, push the agenda on a larger scale, but to make some headway? If it's a drop in the ocean, but if everybody collectively does something, we can make the most of this decade. Because, pretty much we've all got children and we're all invested in being able to make sure that, our grandchildren are around and, and have a sustainable world to be able to live in and appreciate and the benefits that we've had. So what are some of those key things that we need to do?
Yeah. So I'll start off with what you said. We're all at an individual level. We have kids, we have family. We want to make sure things are okay. One of the biggest challenges is actually us as consumers and our lifestyle behavior and choices. Yeah. Consuming too much, and we just need to start finding that balance. And I know as an individual, we can feel it's, the problem is so huge, we can't do anything. But if it's 8 billion people doing one thing at a time, then, it's a significant, powerful change. I think for business, the critical thing is for them to also understand that, when we're talking about sustainability, we're not just saying it's a nice to do. Of course, there's the mindset change that has to happen for leaders, etc. But if you look at your business model and you're fundamentally negatively impacting the environment or negatively impacting society, that's a huge risk for you for the next decade. So it's a question you have to start asking yourself as a business leader or a CEO. How long do I want my company to exist for? And how sustainable is this business model? So if you're a beverage company, for example, we will soon experience, because of climate change, water crisis, and there will be water scarcity. So what's your solution for water? If your business model is based around beverages, if you're a cement company or in the building industry, emissions will continue to be regulated more and more as we move along. So what's your solution for cement or alternative building materials or energy that you will be using? It's got to be something that, people and CEOs start taking a lot more seriously because it will impact their business. But industries are also, starting to have that lens as well. So a CEO shouldn't feel like he's on his own trying to figure out what I need to do
Right.
for my business. There's industries that are already mapping out these are the issues for our industry, because the change has to be massive. It has to be to get us to the 1.5 global average temperature. There's got to be a huge systemic change. So CEOs can look at what's happening in the industry and then take those examples, because that's what the industry needs to start fixing and getting right.
And do you think that there's a lag between organizations looking at it from a profitability perspective, and that's why it's a nice to have, as opposed to, well, actually, hang on a minute, and particularly the macroeconomic financial environment that we're going into, that they understand that if we are actually addressing sustainability issues internally, we can generate more profit from it? Is there a disconnect there? Is that why there's such a lag and we haven't made the headway, or is that not the case that you found?
Yeah, you've nailed it. So some of the big challenges with the sustainability implementation is, the idea of, how should I put it, infinite growth in a finite world. So we've had this business model and this understanding of economy that says we can keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing. But climate change tells us that we can't. So we're basically using our natural resources much faster than the earth can actually regenerate itself. So infinite growth, finite resource just don't go together. And so there's that tension from what we've always been used to doing as business leaders in our economies, as citizens and consumers. We just know we can keep on doing this, but this is the reality check now, that it doesn't work like that. So there's still a lot of resistance because we're always used to keeping the same habits and doing the same things that have always worked before. But this is a game changer. We have to do things differently. And so companies will often say, or business leaders will say, we don't have the money to do this. We don't have the resources, etc. If you frame it that way, sure. But that's because you've been doing things in a wrong way for a long time. And there was no consequence at that time, But now, if you look at your risks from that social and environmental perspective lens, or your production and consumption from an economic lens, 10 years down the line, those things will be an impact for your business. So I think it's fundamentally shifting that mindset and saying, what are the risks? It's not just about producing and consuming. It's what's going to hit us and cost us because of regulation, because of scarcity, that's going to either help us evolve as a company to continue and produce new products and services, or are we going to die out like other companies have done in the past because they didn't adapt?
I think that's one of the key points of being able to look at it as new market growth and new segment growth, as opposed to, just copping fines because you haven't complied or what have you. Whereas you do hear some chatter of, if we have to have a fine for this, it's not that significant. It's not that detrimental to what we're doing to push us to change. Whereas some of those elements of going, well, you need to look at that longer term view of, what market offerings you've got, or where are you getting that growth, or how are you going to continue to hit these profit margins for your shareholders and those returns and those yields that are expected in even a 5-year period, let alone a 10-year period, if you're not making that shift now. And, we can start to see how things are impacting geopolitically, that we have to reroute things from a supply chain perspective as well. So this is mapped into various aspects. You just can't go from one continent to another just to try to get a cheaper source of supply. That's not the answer. And the governance issues will start to sort of clamp down on that, as well as different free trade agreements, let alone what's going to come over the next couple of years, particularly. But if people aren't doing some of those things. So for organizations that, understand, right, we need to take this a lot more seriously than just worrying about fines, or even, charging to offset carbon emissions and expecting consumers to come up with it in various ways. What's the one key thing that they really need to focus on, and how do they need to measure that so that they can actually articulate it internally and create that right strategy and then get the buy-in from whoever their teams and their stakeholders and even their market is to start to really shift the needle on this. What's this one thing that everybody needs to be doing from a corporate perspective?
Yeah. So I'll phrase it this way. I'll say there are two things. You need to understand your context as a business.
Yeah.
What's happening around you? How is your industry shifting? What's the regulatory landscape starting to look like? Yeah, you can't operate in isolation. It won't work. You have to really understand that context. What's happening in terms of your customers, your investors? What's shifting in their thinking? So that's what I put as the first step. And then the second step is something that's often called materiality. But this basically just means look at your business model and ask yourself, what are my social, environmental, and economic risks? And then, like you highlighted, which is really where the opportunity needs to start shifting and saying, what are my opportunities as well? Right? And when you map these out, because they're fundamental to your business model, you start to see what you need to address, and from there, then you can start acting on it. You can start driving the agenda. Then you can measure your success, because you can't measure success on something that you haven't defined for yourself as critical, So those would be the two things that I would say fundamentally. Understand what's happening around you, figure out from your business model, what are your risks and what are your opportunities? Because like you said, I think there's the regulation and there's the fines, but sooner or later, if your model doesn't fit for the world we need in 10 years, 15 years time, then you're out of the game. So why not start now making that shift rather than waiting for later? And I think this is a thing companies and leaders have to start understanding in a really big way. 10 years or 2030, which is 8 years, is a short time. But you need to start moving now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, the key takeaway from all of this is that organizations need to start looking at this in a commercial context, as opposed to a nice to have warm and fuzzy environmental context. A lot of the chatter has very much been in the latter group, as opposed to drive this forward and to get the yields that we need, and then being able to deep dive at industry, at government, and continent levels. We need to be looking at it as a commercial conversation so that everybody actually starts to understand what our responsibilities are, and then drive that right through into, so it's permeating from individuals as consumers, pushing it back up to then forcing organizations to really make that shift and make it as quickly as what the world actually needs it, that we achieve these outcomes. Otherwise, we're probably not going to get where we need to get in a 10-year
period. Exactly. And, there's the Paris Agreement, which talks about emissions and etc., which we definitely have to deal with. But another useful framework is the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's 17 goals, which say these are the things we need to get right in the next 8 years for us as businesses, as society, etc., to be in a good place. So there is a framework. There's clear KPIs. It has clear targets. So if you use that and you look at your business and say, okay, which SDGs or which, sustainable development goal is important for my business model, it gives you a framework to start tackling things on. And I think, there's a survey that was done by Accenture and the Global Compact of like 2,000 plus global CEOs across 120 countries. And they already highlighted that they're dealing with more than 10 different global challenges. So the whole idea of business continuing the same way just can't happen. Sustainability has to be how you build the resilience of your business if you want to go into the future.
I think that's the key point. Sustainability has to be built into the resilience of your business if you want to continue moving forward. So, Susan, if somebody wanted to reach out to you to get some more information to help them understand the context of their business and some of the things that they need to do, how do they get in touch with you? What's the best way to get your guidance?
Yeah. So my website, Responsible Business Consulting. .co.ke, because I'm based in Nairobi, Kenya. And there's a form there with my contact details. That's where I'd send them to. Or LinkedIn, they can look for me on Susan Njoroge.
Fantastic. And we'll certainly put all your tags and everything into the video so that everybody can like and subscribe and share, and also reach out to you on LinkedIn, follow all of your hints and your tips, and certainly understand what the 17 goals are, and you know, some of these key frameworks which are out there that everybody can use so that they can be applied, because this is the reality of the situation. It needs to be a commercial conversation. It's not like none of this has never been done. There are tools there for people to use. And, you know, look, I think we can certainly, this is a conversation and a topic where we can get some curated or some more specific context information, particularly for the supply chain community and all of our clients and followers and supply chain from all of our platforms, and also all of, you know, the Logistics Executive Group followers that we have. So we can certainly, you know, put a poll up just to see, well, from the audience, what are some of the key things that they're struggling with? Do they need us to have a deeper conversation and get some more guidance from you on particular aspects? Is it, you know, from an air freight industry or the retail and sourcing, you know, sector? Or is it possibly, you know, land transport emissions or manufacturing or moving things from China to Africa, continent issues or governance issues? We'll put a poll up and just sort of ask some of those questions. I think that's great. And then that way we can deep dive or share a bit more insight specific to, you know, what some of the challenges are that our followers are actually having. So we'll be able to take this conversation a lot further and hopefully get some headway so that do what we can do and add some value into the industry to make a positive impact on that. So thank you so much for joining me today, Susan, and greatly appreciate your time. And certainly the conversations that we will be having as a follow-up to this, we'll deep dive into a lot more aspects over the coming weeks, and then create a bit of a series which I think will be quite interesting. For anybody else who wants further information, reach out to either us on LinkedIn, follow Logistics Executive Group. There's also the Logistics Executive LinkedIn group, the hub of your supply chain, where there's a wealth of information in there that you can retrieve, or directly email one of us, and then we can get all of those contacts and links through to you. And like and share these posts so that way we can get all of your teams and highlight the agenda through your organizations and start to do what we can do as individuals in our own consumption, and then our corporate roles of taking things further. But Susan, thanks for joining me today, and thank you for speaking with us on Logistics Executive TV, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. Thanks, Cass. It's been great to be here with you. Have a great day.